Hello, Mr. Lubkowski here. Now we're going to go through our second lesson on Mozart's Requiem in D minor. We're starting off with a do now activity, so let's have a look at that. Just before we do that, you are going to need obviously your book, your notes from last lesson, headphones or speakers, so you can hear the musical examples and make sure that you're able to pause, possibly rewind, play again, etc. etc. So let's make a start. So checking in your notes from the previous lesson, and I'd like this in full sentences, please. Feel free to pause at any time. Some do now questions. In what year was the Requiem in D minor written? What do you think? Full sentences, please. Which of the following instruments is not used in the Requiem in D minor? Is it the clarinet, the oboe, the viola, or the organ? Question 3. Write a short definition of what a Requiem Mass is from a religious perspective. So not what the piece of music is, but in a church service, as part of a church service, what is a Requiem Mass? And finally, what does et lux perpetua mean? So pause, write your sentences. We'll come back in a minute and we'll go through some example answers. Make sure you've written them in full sentences. Okay, so hopefully you have written down these answers. Let's just go through and have some example answers of the kind of thing you should be writing down. So, in what year was the Requiem in D minor written? Here's an example answer. Mozart's Requiem in D minor was started in autumn 1791, but was unfinished at the time of Mozart's death on the 5th of December. His student Franz Xaver Süssmayr completed the composition using Mozart's ideas and musical sketches. Okay, that's an example of that answer. Move on to question 2. Which of the following instruments is not used in the Requiem in D minor? And our example answer, the Requiem in D minor does not use oboes in its instrumentation. There are also no flutes or horns, which is not typical of the style of the time period. Notice that there's additional information you can add, then you should add. Question 3. Write a short definition of what a Requiem Mass is from a religious perspective. Here's our example answer. The Requiem Mass is also known as a Mass for the dead. It's a service in the Catholic Church offered for the repose, a state of rest, sleep, or tranquility of the soul of a dead person. So there's your example. And finally, question 4. What does et lux perpetua mean? The meaning of the Latin words et lux perpetua is perpetual light and is one of the key phrases in the Requiem aeternam in the Requiem in D minor. So I'll just quickly go back so you can just check your sentence against mine. There we go. So example sentences there, when you're asked to write a full sentence, okay, any additional information, okay? So obviously, et lux perpetua means perpetual light, but there's other information you can give about Mozart's Requiem, about it being a phrase within Requiem aeternam. So we're not talking about as little as you can write. You want to give a good full sentence, a good full answer to give that real good idea that you know what you're talking about, okay? Okay then. Now, we're going to go through and look at some analysis for the Requiem aeternam. We're going to listen to the Requiem aeternam from the Requiem in D minor. This time we're going to focus on the musical elements rather than just the translation of the words. Last lesson we looked at the translation of what the words mean. Okay? This lesson we're going to look at actually how Mozart has written the piece of music itself. Now, you should pause the music and write down summarized notes based on the scrolling information. Again, summarizing this information is a really important skill, so pause as many times as you need to. There's information that's there for you. Pause when you need to. It's time linked. So the comments that are scrolling, a lot of them are time linked to what is happening in the music at that time. So rewind, re-listen, rewind, re-listen, really try to get your ear in on what's happening with the voices, what's happening with the instruments, and how Mozart is trying to portray the emotion of this piece of music. Okay. So an example summary, just because just to make sure you're aware of what an example summary might be. One of the things that comes up in this video on the scrolling text is this paragraph. The music opens in a polyphonic texture where an opening melody by the bassoon is answered by the basset horns, also sometimes played by clarinets. This melody or subject is passed around the bassoons and basset horns to form a form called a fugue. Now, if you were reading that short paragraph, okay, what would you summarize? What's the summarize of that part? Well, as an example, the things you would pick out to kind of bullet point and summarize would be the start of the piece is polyphonic. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, what does polyphonic mean? Don't worry, we get to a definition of that later on in the lesson. We have done it before, okay? It means many sounds playing, okay, at once, interweaving melodies, but we'll go through a more detailed definition as a reminder. But yeah, so don't worry if there's words that you're not quite sure. Again, check back on your notes. We've talked about monophony and polyphony before, but again, if you need a recap, there is one later on in this lesson. Bassoon melody answered by basset horns, and a form called a fugue. So you can take a paragraph, you can cut it down to three main pieces of information there. Okay? All right? So you want to pause as much as you need to, listening through to this movement, which we heard last lesson, at the end of last lesson. So pause as many times as you need to, and we'll go from there. I thought it was later on, but it's now. Just a keyword reminder. Polyphonic, many voices or instruments playing interweaving melody lines, often sounds complex and busy. No one melody is more important than another. That's polyphonic. Just so you're aware what we're saying polyphonic is. You can hear it. It's like, again, I always call it like musical spaghetti. It's when these melody lines weave in and out of one another. So yeah, listen out for that. And homophonic. There is one main melody being played or sung, but harmony and accompaniment is added to the melody. In vocal music, it's often where the singers sing the words at the same time as each other, but on different notes, creating harmonies or chords. Okay? So listen out for when it's polyphonic and when it's homophonic. Okay? Okay, I'm going to turn my camera off and enjoy. Make sure you pause as many times as you need to, and I'll see you when you've done this. Okay, 1 second. Just skip across to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So, some of the scrolling text, in fact, all of the scrolling text that was on there, I'm just going to put on the screen for you in case you missed anything. And then I'm just going to go through and put in some example summaries of how I would have summarized the information. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to copy what I do. It's better actually if you summarize it. Sorry, pardon me, I've got hiccups. If you summarize it yourself, but here are some examples of the summary. The piece is in the key of D minor. Mozart was inspired by Michael Haydn to write this piece. The structure of the Requiem in D minor has the same structure as the Haydn piece. We're going to listen to an extract of the Michael Haydn Requiem later on in this lesson. The start of the piece is polyphonic. Bassoon melody answered by basset horns and a fugal structure. Okay, pause and summarise, and then when you've paused and you've summarised the information, obviously then you can continue, and I'll go through my example summary. Okay, summary. Simple use of strings at the start. Large leaps in the strings help to build the dynamics. Use of brass to add more volume and power to the music. Addition of loud timpani to ensure the piece is powerful and emotional. Again, the same thing, just pause, summarise the information if you haven't already, and then unpause, and I'll go through some examples of what you wanted to pick out and summarise. Okay, voices enter loudly, forte. Bass voices enter first in the style of Handel. Tenor, alto, then soprano join in with the basses. The range of the voices gets higher and higher through this section. Polyphonic vocal texture until the words Dona eis Domini, when it becomes homophonic. Okay, same thing again. Pause, summarise, then we'll go through some examples. The voices move from polyphonic to homophonic and back again throughout the piece. Polyphonic means many sounds, and homophonic means the voices are singing the same words at the same time as one another, in chords. As the words calm down, the soprano solo enters with a much calmer melody, te deset hymnos. Again, pause, make sure you've got your summary for this section. We'll go through our example answers. The soprano melody is based on an older Gregorian chant originally sung by monks in the medieval period. The music here sounds like a hymn with a simple melody and limited vocal range. The strings create a shimmering and moving feeling by playing up and down in scales at this point in the piece. Same thing again. Pause, summarise, go through here. Choir re-enters and the music becomes louder again. The orchestra become more important during this part of the piece. The words "Hear my prayer" are matched with the dynamics and style of the choir's singing. As the words calm down, the music gets quieter and less energetic sounding. Okay, moving on. Again, pause, summarise, unpause, we'll go through examples. The opening melody returns with higher and louder strings. The voices become more polyphonic as the emotion builds towards the end of the piece. The words are hard to hear at times, but most people would know the words of a Requiem Mass, so would still understand what was going on. Again, pause, summarise, unpause to go through examples. The voice becomes homophonic again on the words et lux perpetua. Mozart said that he'd written this piece for his own death. The piece ends quietly and slowly as the words ask for forgiveness from God when we die. So make sure you've got the summary down, whether it be my summary or hopefully the summary that you did on looking at that information. So we are going to have a listening comparison. Now these are listening comparisons. This is quite similar to what you do in GCSE music. 40% of the GCSE music course is a listening analysis, basically paper. And you would get played sometimes 30 or 45-second clips of music, and you'd be asked to identify what's going on in the music from a variety of styles. In this case, we're going to listen to, because we found out that Mozart was inspired to write his Requiem by his friend and composer Michael Haydn, who'd also written a Requiem Mass slightly before Mozart wrote his. So Mozart was inspired by his friend Haydn's Requiem. So we're going to listen to 30 seconds of the Mozart Requiem. Then we're going to listen to 30 seconds of the Michael Haydn Requiem. And I want you to compare the similarities and the differences musically speaking. Now, initially you want to write it as bullet points. When you have your bullet points, I'd like you to convert these into full sentences. Okay, aim for maybe 5 or 6 bullet points. You probably can get quite a lot more than that, but I would expect at least 2 or 3 similarities and 2 or 3 differences between these pieces. So, for example, if we're going simple, the words. Are the words the same? Are the words different? Instrumentation. Is the instrumentation the same or different? Tempo. Okay, the way the music proceeds between voices to instruments, instruments to voices. Okay, I'm not going to give too much away, otherwise I'm giving you the answers. But it's about listening. Okay, listening, and again, you can rewind. Okay, each clip is 30 seconds. I'm only going to play them once each, but if you want to listen to another one, you just rewind, listen again to the other one, and compare. I think that you should be listening to each of these pieces maybe 3 times each to be able, and that's what you do in a GCSE. You'd get the extracts 2 or 3 times. You can listen to it more than that if you really want to try and kind of drill down into what the similarities and the differences are. Similarities are possibly the easier. Differences might be more difficult to pick up on, but there are definite differences. They're different pieces of music, but there's also definite similarities between the two. Okay, so let's move on. Now I'm going to play the Mozart first, and then I will play the Haydn. Okay, they're only 30-second clips, so Mozart first and then Haydn. But obviously, whoops-a-daisy. But obviously, then you can pause, rewind as many times as you like to get those answers. Here we go. I'm going to mute my microphone, and then we will. Then I'll press play. Okay, now I'm going to play the Haydn. Okay, so you can listen to those as many times as you like. Okay, and if needs be, you can obviously go back to the actual question to look at compare similarities and differences. Okay, now that's the end of our lesson. The Microsoft Forms is wanting you to put in your extended answer for that listening comparison question. Really try and get as much detail as you can. It's not about how many words you type. It's not about adding in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of words. It's about quality, not quantity. Okay, that's why I'm saying bullet points first is a good idea, because you can really listen to one and go, okay, ooh, that's different. Ooh, that's similar. Write down a list. When you have a list, okay, of things bullet pointed down, similarities, differences, convert them into sentences. Then you've got your answer. Type it into Microsoft Forms. Press submit. Okay, good luck. I will look forward to seeing you next lesson. And hopefully you're all doing well. Looking forward to seeing you soon. And we have, after this, one more lesson on Mozart's Requiem. Hopefully you are appreciating just how amazing a composer Mozart was. We've obviously looked at his clarinet concerto. We're looking at his Requiem in D minor, an absolute genius and one of the greatest composers who've ever lived. And again, feel free to be looking into some more of his music, getting onto Spotify or iTunes or YouTube or wherever it is you get your music from. And yeah, go and listen to some Mozart. There's no shortage of amazing pieces of music to listen to by him. But I will look forward to seeing you next lesson. Take care of yourselves. And well done again. Take care.